All right. Hey, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great Wednesday and enjoying the nice warm weather we're having here. So, today, the reason for our little get together is to chat a little bit about how you can easily monitor and track your expenses, Azure expenses, and how you can do that with tools like Power BI and using a simple SQL database in the mix to make it even a simple task of what can be a little bit of a confusing path. So with that being said, I'll start rolling through my slides here. As you may see, it's very high level slides here. We'll be spending most of our time doing a demo or a walkthrough of what we have going on to share with other folks. And also we'll keep the session very interactive. Anybody have any questions or any comments, please feel free to post in the chat and I'll try to answer, or feel free to stop me whenever you have something to address. Sounds great. So a little bit about myself before we get into the content. So my name is Babu Shafi, and at current role at Tenaska Inc., I hold a Director of Cloud and Technology Infrastructure title, and I head up the server infrastructure and networking teams here at Tenaska. And in the past, I have roots all over the place. Okay, I started off back in the day doing SharePoint online, or actually SharePoint work, and I've kind of worked through all the different versions of SharePoint, and then I moved into a cloud architect role, which was not a huge departure from where I was with SharePoint stuff, but it kind of was a natural progression. And primary focus has been Azure, but I'm slowly getting into AWS and helping Tenaska pave the way to get into the cloud. And it has been about 3 years since we started the cloud migration journey here at Tenaska. And at this point, we are cloud first, and we actually operate a virtual data center. I call it a data center, but we migrated our one of the two data centers into Azure using infrastructure as service, a combination of applications as service and software as service. So that's a whole bunch of stuff that we did. So anyway, that's a little bit about myself. And I wanted to kind of give that introduction because that is what basically led us to what we're going to see in the next few minutes. The need to track and monitor what we're doing in Azure, and at the same time keep it very simple and flexible at the same time for us to manipulate the data that we get out of Azure monitoring. So with that being said, how do you really monitor your Azure expenses? And that's where I would like to kind of start and set the groundwork there. So right off the bat, you have your native Azure tools available to you, like the cost management blade and the budgets blade, and then your advisor. Advisor is pretty good because it not only tells you what you're doing, but it can also tell you where you can save money and kind of make some tweaks and also save more money and that kind of stuff. So out of the box, native tools give you good enough detail. However, if you think you need more detail, you can always leverage third-party tools like Cloud Supervisor, Cloud, and there's a ton more that I can list out here. And with that being said, what is it that we get out of custom tools? It's pretty easy because you get what the native tools give you and what the third-party tools can also give you with just a little bit of Power BI experience. And for a quick example here, let me show you what this. So I have a little dashboard here. This is our little expense, and as you can see, there's not a whole lot of detail available for me. Yeah, sure, I see some numbers, and I see some detail here, but not to the level of detail that I would like to drill in and pull data out. So then what happens? How do you take this data and turn it into something that is much more interesting for you? So that's where our custom tooling comes into place. So what we will do in our workshop or in the next 40 minutes is we will go through the process of creating a data set in Power BI and then look at how you would use a SQL table for storing what we call XREF data, cross-ref data. And what the cross-ref data is basically a list of all your resource groups in Azure and what applications they may map to. And that structure works really well if you had started off by following some best practices and try to keep all your applications inside a resource group and not have them be scattered all over the place. And also, it helps in, not only it helps in monitoring and tracking expenses, but it also helps in the long run in terms of building out ARM templates or some high availability management processes that you may develop in the long run, or easy replication. So without getting into a lot of detail into the best practices, all I'll say is if you went through the process of organizing your assets into resource groups that are tied to applications, you have a pretty good start. And then we'll go in and look at how we can explore the data set that Power BI, the Azure Consumption Insights offers us. And then we'll create some dashboards and go from there. So the first step in this process is to get an API access key, and you can request this from the person in charge of administrating your EA portal. And you got to note that this key is usually valid for 6 months. Not usually, it's always valid for 6 months. So you would want to keep that in track. So when the key expires, you get a new key, because this key is actually the only way you're going to connect into that data at the API level, and you will know when this key is expired because all your data is going to be blank, and you're not going to have much use of the dashboards that you created. So any questions so far before we pull up Power BI?
I don't see any.
Okay.
But I think we are good.
Okay. So first step, how do you connect and pull data? Power BI desktop, and once you create that connection and pull this data, there is a connector called Azure Consumption Insights. This is the guy that you would be using. And once you connect in and start pulling out data, you can start exploring this table here. There's also Azure Cost Management, which gives you enough data, but not at the level that we will go into. And by going into the consumption insights, you can go as far as back as possible into your data. By default, it will restrict you to the last 6 months, but you can always manipulate that query and go as far as back as you want to. So we'll connect with that, plug in your user credentials, or the API key that we just looked at, and then what that would give you is this nice little table called usage details, because we're going after the usage details table and the price sheets table. So these two tables are what come or what are coming out of the Azure Consumption Insights. And as you may see, there's a little join between the product names. And then here's our third leg, which is the resource group crossref table. This is our custom table that we have, and I'll show you what it looks like. So it's basically simple little table. Like I mentioned, it's a bunch of resource group names and the application names and any business unit, department, and what kind of an environment that the application looking is hosted at. Is it a prod or is it a dev? And if there's any charge code that you want to associate with it, you can do it here. And at this point, you may think, why do you need to do all this? Why don't we just do it with tags instead? Yeah, you can do it with tags. However, when it comes to exporting this data and manipulating the data to a point where it is usable, the restrictions or limitations kind of outweigh the benefit of going down the path of having a custom table in the mix. This actually serves two purposes, I should say. It helps you keep track of what's going on in your environment. So if somebody were to spin up something new and the person that is required to be or is responsible to be monitoring and kind of who is the gatekeeper for your Azure has no visibility into what went in. So this table kind of acts as a checkpoint, basically. So anyway, with that being said, so as you can
Babu.
see here,
Babu.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Joe is asking, is that pulled from tags? Is the RGXREF table being pulled from tags, or how is that updated? I heard you said it's not from tags. Is that right?
That is correct. It is not from the tags. It is a completely separate standalone SQL table. And as you can see here, it is pulled from a little SQL database that we host in Azure. And all it's got is one little table here. And this is a manual process that we follow. And I call it manual because it follows a change management process. When somebody's requesting a new asset to be generated or deployed in Azure, we assign it a resource group name and update the table, and then go provision the asset so that it's always updated. However, I do have an example to show you what happens if that change management process is not followed here pretty soon. Does that help?
So what I'm getting is it's an inventory where you maintain whenever there is a new asset created in Azure, you link it through the resource group.
Yep, basically.
Hope that answers your question, Joe.
Yeah. Cool. So we got our joins created. The resource group name is joined to the resource group name in the usage details table. And we will be primarily using the usage details. There's only very few scenarios where I've even gone into price sheets, to be honest. And we do that for invoicing purposes. Joe's got another one. Yeah, you could do that. We did actually think quite a bit about how do we want to keep that table automated. However, we decided not to do it as part of a secondary checkpoint if our change management process was not followed. And because we have about 16, I'd say about 18 developers here, they all have access to go in and spin up assets. And we have a pretty much, what do you call the trust but verify policy in place. So we trust our developers to go spin up assets and get things moving when they want things to be provisioned. However, we have these checkpoints to verify if they follow the proper steps. So hope that kind of clarifies why versus why not. Awesome. Okay, so going over to the report now. This is what we came up with. It could probably look like what is going on here. So it's a whole bunch of information, but I can tell you where we use all of this. We use this as part of our daily updates that a bunch of stakeholders get, and we have monitoring dashboards on screens here. Those screens get this update. And as you can see, the bottom half, which is kind of the grid of what happened yesterday, where did we spend our money yesterday, $1,100. There's a nice little breakdown, storage, VMs, site recovery, and then up here you see the application breakdown, disaster recovery, network, and so on. But you see this little blank. So guess what? That was something that somebody spun up and did not follow the change management process. That's our checkpoint. So somebody spent $94 yesterday. And when we see something like that, we try to, one, investigate what happened. Is it a legitimate build out, or was it just something somebody overlooked the process and got it set up? And on the top, as you can see, it's a daily rollover, and there's month-to-date costs, monthly costs, quarterly, and then, of course, yesterday. And then we can see what kind of a spread we've been doing with all our expenses and how it's progressed and how are some of our applications that are getting their expenses charted out. And that's pretty much it. So let's start exploring the data set. So if you wanted to, say, pull up, for example, I will create something called, I'll bring an application and I'll see what was the cost for all of these applications over a period of time. I can easily say cost. And as you can see, it filtered down to usage details. And I'll pull my usage in there. And this is across the board for all the data that has been there. And if you wanted to put a date around it, you can bring it here and convert that to something else. Let's see, let's find what is a great time chart. Let's do that. Let's bring a date into this guy. That's not what I want. I want date, and then I want cost. But now if I start drilling into it, you can see how the cost has been. And again, it's broken down by day, and so you get the idea of all the different fields that are available for us. And all these fields that you see here exist in what you will get out of the traditional cost management tool in Azure. Like, for example, if you were here and looked at all the different filters you can pull down, like meter category, subcategory, all of that is actually here. Meter name, meter subcategory. The biggest benefit that you get is the ability to customize and do whatever you want to join or do whatever you want to join and get that extra layer of grouping in place. And then what this also allows us to do is to pull up a quarterly invoice and say, hey, I have a charge code that is tied to a certain resource group. So let me see. Usage details, resource group, and I'll bring in a charge code, right? So if your accounting department is asking for what did we spend for this little application that is part of a resource group called credit, $1,400. There you have it. So the other way to do this was to go into the EA portal and export the usage data, which was rows and rows and columns of data, and somehow extrapolate that every time you had to run invoicing, and then send it to accounting. However, with something like this, you can easily do this, and not only do this on the fly, but you can kind of have a dashboard like this sitting across people saying, hey, this is what you're spending. Does it? Any questions so far?
Looks like we are good.
Okay. I mean, at this rate, we may be done pretty soon.
No worries, but this is good stuff.
Okay. This is pretty easy to manage, and once you get the framework kind of up and running, which was the table like I mentioned, then you're pretty much living inside of the Power BI. You can change all of this and easily say, now I want to know about the meter category or the subcategory. Let's see what happened here and get a breakdown there. Could be up there. So there's your cost breakdown, and then you also have your charge code breakdown. The team knows where the billing needs to be updated for, or which department the billing needs to be updated for. So that being said, pretty much coming to a close. Anything else that, okay, let's go try to publish this to PowerBI.com and then see how we can use the data from there. So the same dashboard that you saw, now it's published to PowerBI.com. And actually, it is a dashboard. It's not just a report. So then you have the ability to subscribe, as you may know, and send this as a snapshot to stakeholders that you may know that have interest in your data, and also have any alerts set on certain KPIs if you would like, and also have alerts based on those KPIs as well. Cool. Let's see if we have any questions coming in.
Not yet. It's good stuff, Babu. I think I used to utilize this particular API earlier, but I'm just trying to understand the benefits you might be seeing here by using EA billing API over the Azure Cost Management connector that Power BI provides now. Because what I understand is most likely whatever features they have under Enterprise Agreement Portal is getting migrated to Azure Cost Management slowly and steadily. So probably in next couple of years, EA portal might just be removed and everything will be available in Azure Cost Management. So
yeah, the only differences that we've seen is the limitation of data. The 6-month data is all that we were getting out of the cost management connector, versus with this connector, you can pretty much pull however long you want to go back.
I believe you can specify number of months when you are connecting through this API, right? You have to provide number of months upfront.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. And there is also another app for that Microsoft publishes, Azure Cost Management app. It's a Power BI application that people can utilize for managing their Azure cost. Have you tried using that?
Yeah, we have. As a matter of fact, again, that was pretty much the cost management of what you see in the native tools. And that is where we started, and we evolved and just ended up building our own dashboard after that. Yeah, that is a good place to start if you're starting off brand new.
Absolutely. So Anyone else has been using similar kind of Power BI dashboards in their organizations to manage or represent these Azure spends?
I don't offhand, but I do have a question if you don't mind me asking. When you guys are setting this up, or once you guys have this in place, there's no back-end data store with this essentially or anything outside. I mean, you got your Crossref table, but essentially it's just an API request when you're opening up Power BI, or there's no, basically you don't have any permanent storage where this data is residing, correct?
That is correct.
Cool. I'm just thinking we deal with some of the third-party tools with as we work with various clients and managing their cost, and the ones we've used suck, to put it nicely. And looking at this, I could see it being something pretty interesting, because I know a lot of times what I've had to do is, pull the usage details as a CSV, dump it into Excel, and do some pivot table action. And looking at this, and also looking at the basically using the cost management directly, I think this might be a way to bypass that essentially, and at least get some basic details going for them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can kind of relate to everything that you just said, because we were doing that. That's where we started, exporting all of that Excel data, pivot table, and then PDF it, so it is not lost in translation, and hand it over to our accounting group to pay the invoice to Microsoft. And then we went into the default Azure cost management app, and that gave us a little bit of flexibility to watch what's going on. But it's been a few iterations, and this is kind of I would say this was a 5th iteration of cost management and tracking expenses.
No, it looks good. I do like what you guys have. So
cool.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Anyone else has any questions for Babu?
And I'll leave my email address in here as well. Actually, I had it in one of the slides there. You can email me anytime if you have any questions, or find me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer any questions, help you out with setting this up, and maybe sharing some of the pitfalls that we found ourselves in.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, Vaibhav, if everyone is good, I may turn it back to you and see where we can go after this.
All right. Thank you, Babu.